You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, a big happy Halloween to everybody. That's right, we are coming live to you on Halloween night. As you can see back there, got my Michael Myers thing going. Had to replace Boba Fett for the time being. In fact, I almost suggested that we actually review the Lego.
The Lego Star Wars.
With the Terrifying Tales. Because we actually meant to do that last year, and we never did. And so I thought, man, if we go live on Halloween, we really should do that. But problem is, another Star Wars series came out. Did it drop on Wednesday or did it drop on Friday?
Wednesday.
Okay. Yep. And I know the difference is you actually just blew through all the episodes, right?
Yeah, I just recently finished them all.
Okay. Well, I basically, in the interest, kind of like what we did with Star Wars Visions, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this one episode at a time, watch it, as we review. And, of course, a special shout out to our coworker and my friend Derek, who actually gave me and provided this Star Wars Force Awakens shirt that I'm wearing. I had promised him at some point that I would actually wear this shirt on the show and mention it, that he gave it to me. So I had to do it. But now, in thinking about this and talking about this, because, I mean, I know you just basically got home. I managed to sneak in Halloween 3, trying to maintain that whole watching horror movies and stuff on Halloween. And as I've said, basically to everybody in promoting this show, it's like, listen, when you get done either trick-or-treating yourself or maybe taking your kids out or, I don't know, hanging out or whatever, you're done doing that, but before you start that whole pizza horror movie marathon, take a little bit of time to check out this video that we're making live right now. And, of course, if you guys are watching this on the rebroadcast, well, maybe you're not going to be quite in the moment, but uh-oh. Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Chad. Chad is watching on Halloween night.
It's the BIM.
It's D-Rob can't be the only one getting a shout out. Well, you know what? I mean, if you're on, not only do you getting a shout out, Chad, but I mean, we're posting your comment. I don't think Derek's watching us right now. But again, before you get, into the whole Halloween movie marathon, which I am probably going to do once we wrap this show, this is a good time to talk about, this episode. So, Tales of the Jedi. Give us a little bit of background on it, and then give me your thoughts on what you thought of the first episode, which I think was called Life and Death.
Yeah, so Tales of the Jedi is kind of a 6-episode series that was produced by Dave Filoni. It's in the style of the traditional Clone Wars animation, so that was cool. And they're basically taking stories from two different characters, one being Ahsoka Tano, and then the other being Count Dooku. So the first one opens up, this is a story about Ahsoka, and Ahsoka is born. Her dad is really excited, for the birth of his child, and they named her Ahsoka. And this was a really cool episode. It kind of gave you a little bit of a lore into she's not a Twi'lek, which a lot of people tend, even myself, originally kind of thought that she was. She's not a Twi'lek, but she's a Tortugan.
I know, I keep getting that mixed up too, because every single time I'm like, but a tortuga is like this Mexican pastry.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's like tortanga or something like that.
Tortanga or something
I
like
was
that.
trying
I
to think
forgot
of the
how.
same thing, and I almost looked it up. I was so close to looking it up, but in the spirit of how we do this show, I never look anything up. I mean, if you all know, somebody will chat it in, I'm sure. Or comment in the
Right.
comment section, and then we can go,
Might be Chad.
Yeah, Mel, I don't know.
That way he get
I
a
don't know.
shout out.
I don't know. Yeah, but I don't know if Chad goes that hardcore though. It's. I'm just glad he watches and subscribes. Just saying.
But yeah. So this story pretty much is the birth of Ahsoka, and we kind of find out very early on that she has the Force, and that makes her a very special little baby. Um, it's these episodes are only 15 minutes, so but they really get into it like really quick, which I like. But at the same time, it does kind of make you yearn for more, especially the other episodes, which I'll save those for later. But I will say, like, each progressive episode of these characters, it makes you want to see like a longer episode of this.
All right. Well, I'll tell you this. Even though I didn't watch the other episodes like you did, I did actually go through and at least look at all the titles and kind of read the synopsis or whatever. And I have to say, yeah, I mean, when you really look at it, this is one of those episodes that it was cool and it was actually quite emotional. I was really surprised by how emotional this thing was, especially like you said. I mean, they packed this into like a 15, 16-minute episode. So I was really, really shocked by the emotion. And of course, the animation just blew my mind. I mean, once again, hats off to how they keep progressing, because even the earlier stuff, like the earlier seasons of the Clone Wars, still holds up. But I do have to say that with each subsequent series, the animation just keeps getting better and better and more photorealistic. And I mean, even the opening scene of this episode, I was just like, I could just pause that and make that my wallpaper, essentially, for my computer. So I was really blown away by it. But I did actually go, like I said, and read the synopsis of all the other episodes. So I could see where, yeah, kind of like what you were saying, there's a lot that you can really get into maybe with some of the other stuff. But that said, I was in something that I think you and I would both agree would be more of a filler type of an episode of any other show. The whole idea behind this, spoiler alert. I mean, this is a spoiler review, but the idea is to show basically how Ahsoka's little tribe or whatever identified that she was a Jedi. Because one of the biggest things that is always a question is, we know that when kids are young or practically like just born, the Jedi goes and tries to see if they're Force sensitive or whatever. And if they are, then they take them, and then the Jedi actually raise them as their own. That was one of the reasons why with Anakin, it's like, nah, he's too old. This guy, there's always, I mean, he's like 9 years old, but there's already like too much baggage on this guy. So it's like, all right, cool. And so this is basically Ahsoka's story, not so much like her origin story. It's basically kind of a nice little encapsulated thing that definitely says, you know what? This is how she was identified in becoming a Jedi.
Yeah, I mean, this episode was really cool. You basically had the mom who was, going out to hunt, and she took, little Ahsoka with her, which I thought that was kind of odd, but maybe that's part of their culture. And she goes, and she stops by it seems like the wise woman of the tribe, or the elder of the tribe, and has to, speaks with her briefly, and she blesses them before they go on their little journey into the forest to catch some food. And as they go into the forest, Ahsoka is, kind of there with mom, and mom is kind of explaining to her like, oh yeah, this is they find this deer-like creature, and they're like, okay, well, it's game on. So she's kind of explaining to little baby Ahsoka about what's going on there, and then once the mother kills the deer, Ahsoka, first of all, she senses something was wrong, and then she sees looks like a giant saber-toothed tiger that's basically behind her mom. And I have to give it to moms. Moms was pretty formidable. She
Yeah, man.
had no
I mean,
fear.
it was a little bit of... Well, I think they wanted to show that Ahsoka didn't just get her fighting style or whatever strictly from the Jedi, right? Like there's
That warrior spirit, yeah.
yeah, there's a certain amount of that I think within that thing because basically like you were talking about, right? So you had this whole thing to where she was, she had killed this deer-like creature. I mean, I'm sure it's not called a deer. This is Star Wars, but it was a very similar creature. And not only is she, she's like getting down, she's almost like, I don't know, blessing it or some weird thing like that. And she's explained to Ahsoka, like, look, we respect life. We never take more than we need and all this other stuff. So, I mean, it's not just like, hey, I bagged this animal. Cool. I'm going to take it back to the tribe or whatever. It's like, no, there's this whole process that these people or this particular tribe, I don't know if that's true for everybody, but I mean, at least within this group, it's like, hey, there's a thing. And this is one of the things that's passed down because with Ahsoka, we don't really get too much of a cultural vibe with her, Most of the stuff is basically how she relates as a Jedi and her Jedi training and all that other stuff. But you and I have long said that even within the Jedi, you have all these different races and cultures and stuff like that. And some of that does permeate within the Jedi Order. And so I think what they were trying to do is say, hey, look, there's a certain amount of Jedi-esque stuff that, permeates already through this tribe. Part of it is a respect for life. The other part of it, of course, is, yeah, they're formidable, Because I thought the same thing you did. I thought that was kind of weird. Like, she's kind of going out with little baby Ahsoka, like strapped to her little kangaroo pouch
harness
or whatever. Yeah, whatever that was. And yeah, because you're kind of thinking, okay, I get it. Maybe they just don't have daycare there at their little, it's kind of like mama's got to take the kid to work kind of thing, I don't know.
She could have left her with the elder women. I mean, she was just been feeling like loft cats basically over there. But I mean, no, but the cool thing about it, that whole scene when she was actually explaining to Ahsoka, like, we respect life, we respect the animals. It definitely gave me that scene from The Lion King, when Mufasa was taking Simba out and he was like, explaining to him the circle of life. That's basically like what that scene was. And even though she shot the animal and it was there dying, and Ahsoka could feel it, you can tell that, Ahsoka was feeling the life force from that particular animal. And it almost looked like Ahsoka was trying to help the animal in a way.
Well, I mean, because here's the only thing that I admit that I did think during this scene, right? She's animals like dying and she's all like, yes, we respect, do all this. And I'm sure the creature was probably going, excuse me, if you really respect life, how about, I don't know, maybe not
shooting me.
Yeah. Or,
right.
Okay, you shot me. Now you're going to give this whole speech on how you respect life. It's like, okay, I might have a different perspective on this.
Yeah, it's like, don't give me my obituary where I can still hear it.
Exactly. And I thought that because that thing was like dying for, I don't know, 3 minutes of this episode. She's given this whole little dissertation and the things it's like, I mean, which, I mean, honestly, I kind of thought that was grim. If you really think about it, that was sort of dark.
I mean, yeah, in a way I could see in the grand scheme of things, yes, that is a little bit like, okay, man, like, but at the same time, though, she tried to finish it off quickly because it's like, look, I don't want you to suffer.
But so only after like, okay, she gave like a 10-minute speech, though.
Well, at least they were alive to hear, give their roses while they can still hear them.
My whole thing is like, look, if you really want to say this, I mean, it's like the animal, it's like, okay, thrust the blade into the animal and end it, and then give your 10-minute speech.
Right.
I mean, how much of that did Ahsoka really understand? She's like 2 months old or something.
Exactly. Maybe they're super advanced at that age.
Hey, man, who knows? Stranger things, right?
Right. So, then, the mom gets into this whole battle with this giant saber-toothed tiger, for all intents and purposes. And, it was a nice little squabble. The mom didn't give up easily. She had her knife, she had her gun, she was, trying to do her thing, but, she was just really overwhelmed. And on top of that, she's still trying to watch out for her, newly born child. So I can understand why her mind not may have been completely focused on the battle itself. because she's constantly in fear of something happening to her child, and which eventually the saber-tooth tiger kind of got the best of the mom and made it even worse. But by that point, um the it was weird because she let off like these weird like gunshots, and like the whole tribe kind of stopped what they were doing, and went to go assist her. But by the time they got to Ahsoka and Mother Dearest over here, Saber-tooth Tiger kind of ran off with Ahsoka in his mouth and kind of took it to his own little hiding place, little lair, or whatever you want to call it. And I don't even know what the intentions. I mean, I don't know if he was just looking at it as almost trying to take it as his own
Yeah,
child. What he plan on eating it?
no,
I mean, eating her.
I
I
think
don't
he
know.
planned on eating her, because if you look, there was that one scene where it started to kind of open its mouth, and I mean, kudos to little baby Ahsoka. I mean, you see her in this shot that we have to the
Mm-hmm.
well, I guess from you guys' perspective, it'd be to the right of us, but essentially, she was just staring at this thing. It was like she had no real fear of it, even though it was starting to salivate a little. I mean, you would think that even in that age, granted, you're not going to be able to process everything, but at least you should be able to sense, I'm not really safe. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things that Ahsoka didn't do that. In fact, she was reaching out, and she started using this whole thing. And this is something that I thought was really cool, is the fact that she was basically reaching out with the Force. Now, they didn't really make that super, I guess, obvious. I mean, it really depends, because to fans like me, I'm sure, like to everybody, anybody that watches this show anyway, probably would understand that Ahsoka was communicating with it, because when she touched it on its nose, you could see that there was a reaction there with the animal. Like, it was thinking like, whoa, this being or whatever it is actually communicating with me. And I sort of wonder if you got that same vibe where it then changed its intentions. Like, it was going to eat her,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you know what? She's not bad. She's cool. I sort of wonder too if there was a little bit of because it did have some wounds from the battle with Ahsoka's mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe Ahsoka, in a sense, healed those too, because Force healing now is something that they're just putting in everything. And now they're even retrofitting it back to the prequels.
Well, yeah, I mean, the cool thing about that, there's a lot in that little scene. One, it was very reminiscent of Grogu in season 1 of The Mandalorian, when he was communicating with that beast at first, when he was trying to stop him from running over Din, before he kind of lifted it up. The other thing is, it also kind of reminded you of Ezra, because Ezra had that ability. He was really good at communicating with other life forms, particularly animals.
Yeah, and I remember the whole space whale episode was one such example of that,
Mm-hmm. But he also would do like the loth cats or those wolves.
Oh, yeah.
And, he had like, he was always he had a knack for that. So I like the fact that they're keeping that around in the franchise. But yeah, so once that happened, now, of course, the mother's, kind of in mourning, thinking like, her one and only child has been, ripped to shreds by this thing, has to be. And then the little saber tooth comes back out, and everybody's ready to kind of fire upon it. And then they realize like Ahsoka's writing this thing like Mowgli from the Jungle Book or something. You're just like, oh, all right. And then everybody's kind of wondering like, okay, how did this happen? And then the tiger was so peaceful. It walked over, even acknowledged them, and kind of gave that nod to the mother, like, okay, I respect you, that type of thing, and then kind of walked off. And, they kind of were trying to figure out like, well, what the heck happened? And then that's when the elder or the wise woman of the tribe looked at her and said, oh yeah, she's a Jedi. So that was pretty much the gist of the episode. But even in that though, like you got a lot of, like you said, Eric, a lot of emotion. And whether it was happiness, fear, sadness, and then joy. Like you had all those emotions all packed in this one little tight 15-minute episode that was done extremely well. So I really liked the episode.
Oh yeah, I mean, I loved it. And speaking about that saber-tooth tiger looking thing, I mean, it was pretty. First of all, it's pretty gutsy of the thing to do that, because I don't know how much that species actually communicates or thinks or whatever. I mean, obviously, I might be um, making the thoughts a little bit more complex than what they actually are. But you would have to think that from that beast's perspective, even though it has a change of heart and it probably knows, okay, this kid's not gonna exactly just run off and find the camp or whatever. But I don't know if I would have necessarily, if I were that saber-tooth tiger looking creature, I don't know if I necessarily would have just gone up and, you know, say, hey, everybody with guns and everything that are ready to kill me. Here's your kid back. You know what I mean? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it was really cool, and it was cool, like you said, that it actually acknowledged Ahsoka's mom, and that whole scene. There was a lot of emotion in that one scene by itself that I thought was actually really cool, really well done, and something that you don't usually see in an episode like this. Because honestly, if you just look at this episode for what it is, it seems like there's a lot of fluff to it, right? Like if you just looked at it on
Mm-hmm.
paper or even read the synopsis of it, you wouldn't think that this was anything profound. It's not an episode really for all the canon junkies, other than this is how Ahsoka was identified as being a Jedi. That's about the only like canonical thing that you can get out of it, where you're kind of like, okay, this episode is worthy of being in the franchise in Star Wars. It's not a throwaway, in other words.
Well, I kind of looked at it as like I kind of looked at it as a world building thing. Looking at Ahsoka, you're adding on to her world. We've seen her the first time, like I said, we come into contact with Ahsoka's in the Clone Wars animated movie when she's assigned to Anakin, and that's our first glimpse at this character. And to a lot of people, she was kind of annoying. And you see, though, like, okay, once again, this is expanding not just Ahsoka's story, but it's also expanding the Jedi story, as far as, like you said, how people are discovering, the fact that, okay, certain people are force sensitive, or uh, have the ability to um, use the force, and who could potentially become Jedi. So you have that, but then you also see some cultural things, like I said, about her particular race of, and you also have her background, as far as like what type of family she comes from. And you kind of think about that, because you never really hear her talk about that. And you don't know at what point was she taken from her family. I mean, it's probably couldn't been too much, longer after that she probably went to the Jedi temple.
No, I
But
agree.
she came from a good home, what I'm saying? And that's the other thing that's kind of unfortunate, is because, as a parent, you you have to think about it. If you go back to the very beginning, when the father was just
Oh yeah,
so elated
yeah.
to be a dad. What I mean? He was just like, man, this is like the happiest. I mean, he's running through the town. She's here. She's like, the town came to come see her.
Well, it's like you said, it
Everybody
was
was, it
very
was,
Lion King-esque, you know?
yeah, and it was a moment for this little village. And so I'm, when you delve a little bit deeper into it beyond the surface, you have to think about it like, these people are parents for the first time. They're super happy. And then on one moment, they thought their child was dead, because this tiger's run off with their child, and they only can imagine the worst.
Yeah, no,
Then they're met with then they're met with happiness when they see that their child is still alive, and they have their child back. But now they have to question, like, okay, how is this happening?
mhm.
And then
Yeah.
to only realize, like, okay, my child is special, she's gifted. And while you're happy, and probably like, wow, my child is really, a gifted being. But you also probably have to think about, even though we didn't see it, the sadness that's probably had to come because no sooner than you get your child back, now you have to give your child up,
Exactly.
only to probably never see them again.
Well, and
Because now
if
she's
there's
being raised in
anything,
a temple and she's got to,
yeah,
do
and
all this
that's
training and get a master. And she has a whole new family. And the family that she could have had never gets to see her again, probably.
well, and that's what I
So,
would like to see more of. I would
yeah.
like, and again, I'm sort of that aftermath kind of guy. I would like to see
Hmm.
the aftermath of something like that. That doesn't mean I want to focus 3 or 4 episodes or an entire animated series on the post Ahsoka tribe of whatever planet that was.
The therapy sessions are
But I
trying,
mean, it
y'all.
would be well, and maybe not something like that. Maybe you can even pick a more interesting character. I don't know, but I mean, just something where when that child is gone, okay, how does the community or village or tribe or depending on the culture and race you're talking about or
Mhm.
hive, I mean, who knows? So,
Yeah.
how do they deal with that loss? And again, this might be going a little bit too deep for a lot of Star Wars fans, but I just think, you
But yeah,
know,
but that's the thing,
like
though.
right
I
now I'm
mean,
dealing with the loss of my blue light. Just trick. So in the world of trick or treat, I guess it's trick for my Halloween tonight that, you know what, I forgot to charge the battery. It's my fault, but hey, whatever. Whatever.
um, But yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But that's the cool thing about Star Wars is the nuances, and that's
Sure.
where we're getting, and that's the whole point of the Tales of the Jedi. Honestly, is to give you the nuance because, quite frankly, we pretty much know how. I mean, if you're a Star Wars fan, you pretty much know. Okay, they're found as children, they're raised in the Jedi Temple, they get assigned a master, and on it goes. Right? I mean, we know that, but to actually see these nuanced moments of a particular character's life and like how they, to actually witness it is one thing, what I mean? Versus
Hmm.
just kind of knowing the general story of how it goes.
No, I
And that's,
agree. I totally
and
agree.
I think that's the cool thing about this whole series. And as it goes along, I mean, man, it's
Oh, I'm sure.
it's
I'm
crazy.
sure,
Yeah,
it's
and like you may mentioned as we were talking about this the other day, he was like, yeah, man, you have way more positive feelings about this than Star Wars Visions.
yeah,
Absolutely.
well, um,
Because and that's just because it's all part of the of characters we already know, and we're actually delving a little bit deeper into these characters. And that's why I feel like where Star Wars is right now in the franchises, they're trying to add just pieces where they belong to fill in the gaps. They did one, and we'll get to this, when the episode comes up. But man, like they did a cool um connection with another episode from Clone Wars that makes more sense now. And you're just like, man, this is phenomenal. It's phenomenal writing. So yeah, I really did enjoy this episode. Like I said, it was short, easy to the point, like as it was supposed to, but there was a lot packed into it. They put a lot of emotion into this episode, and if you kind of read into some things, you will get a lot out of it.
well, and I agree. And I think that one of the things first and foremost, and this is something I've been saying for a long time. Yes, they're into, I think, a world building phase with some of these things as far as the Star Wars franchise goes, because you do have to look at it from a standpoint of you've created this great world and all these wonderful characters, and now you're at a point to where you gotta choose. Do you delve deeper into the characters you already created, or do you create new ones with a new story and a new world and stuff like this? And I think the answer is you could do both because you have enough medium for that. You can go and make like these little animated shorts or whatever. You can, you don't want to blow a whole movie or something like that on it. And as far as the origin of the Jedi goes, it's kind of like you said. We already know Anakin's story. We know Luke's story. You could go into somebody like, I don't know, maybe Mace or Yoda or whatever, but Ahsoka was one of the ones where, like you said, everybody thought that she was a Twi'lek, but really she's a, I don't know, Portunga or whatever that race is, right? But the thing is, we don't really know how they become Jedi, because when you look at people from either one of those two races, I mean, Jedi are not what you think of when you first think of those races. So it almost like when they had the Wookiee Jedi in the High Republic, it's like, well, how did that come up? How did they do that? So those are the kinds of things I think you would want to see an origin story of. So the fact that they chose Ahsoka and chose to do it, I'll tell you this, though. I think it's interesting that they chose that as the first episode, though. You know?
Well, and honestly, out of all the episodes, this is the weakest one. And this
Of
was not
course.
even a bad episode.
I mean, well, and you know what? And I haven't even seen any other ones, but just reading the synopsis of each of the other episodes, I mean, come on. It's like I'm going, really? That's the one you chose to kick off the series? It's like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a chat from David. I want to put that in here. He says, so they abduct kids? Was the Jedi, who did the Jedi recruit kids for, or who did the Jedi fight for? So this is something that, I mean, I almost hate to put it like this, but this is kind of Jedi or Star Wars 101 stuff. Basically, they've always brought in kids because when you're dealing with somebody that's force sensitive or whatever, you don't want any kind of corruption. You don't know what kind of parents these people are going to be. They need to be trained as Jedi pretty much from birth all the way up through when they take the trials or whatever. So it's necessary in order to, produce what they need to be.
Yeah, I mean, when you're with the whole Jedi thing, they have to start you basically at a blank slate, meaning
Right.
that you really don't have any ill will. You haven't started creating or making decisions or having emotions just yet.
Well, I mean, or more
That's
so
what they're
that
trying.
parents
That's
aren't
what they're
corrupting you with their own ideas and belief. The Jedi want to be the only influence in your life, basically.
because they feel like, in order to utilize that ability and gift properly. And that's the thing. It's not the fact that, the Jedi think they're better than anybody per se, but it's like you're wielding a power that no one else can really truly understand it except for either a Jedi or a Sith.
Yeah.
And of course, the Jedi want to keep as many people away from, going to the dark side as possible. But they ultimately know, some's got to go through the cracks at some point.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they try to get you young enough where they can actually mold you, because once you get to the age where you start having opinions and you start looking at the world through your own eyes and start seeing things, like you start forming these, it's no different than raising your own children. It's like you really want to have a good hand on them to make sure, like, okay, they're not influenced by certain things because you want them to go into a certain path.
Well, and it's kind of like, yeah, if you're training them up to be a certain either occupation or thing or like that, sometimes it would be necessary to do it, right from. I mean, the closest that I could think of right now, just off the top of my head, is an Olympic athlete. You gotta start like when they're 4 or 5 years old training, and because it takes that lifelong commitment to do that. So, yeah, I think it's just really, really cool, but I can see where it would be a little bit disturbing to some. So David follows that up. He says, I meant, are they peacekeepers for the Republic, separatists? The Republic.
The Republic, yeah. So essentially what the Jedi are, they're ambassadors for the Republic. The role of the Jedi is multifaceted, but by and large what they do, they are keepers of the peace. And so a lot
They
of
even
times
say
when
that
there's
in the Phantom Menace, I think, right?
Yep, we're keepers of the peace, not soldiers.
Yeah.
And although they have the ability to fight and defend themselves, that's not primarily what they want to use the Force for.
Mm-hmm.
They actually want to use the Force more so to help settle. They do a lot of political things, like they help settle trade disputes on certain planets, or they're because of the abilities of the Jedi. A lot of people don't try to deceive them because they know that Jedi have this ability where they can read you, and they have these different types of abilities. So they're a little bit more upfront, and they're kind of bend their own will to the Republic in a way, because the Jedi are trying to do go things about things in a peaceful manner. They're really
Yeah.
not trying to start or have conflicts.
Yeah. So I mean, and again, we always rate these things at the end. So I mean, it's kind of tough because on one hand, you want to save the high ratings for some of the episodes that are going to be really spectacular. But at the same time, though, I mean, if I'm judging this thing by its own merit, I got to give it a 4. Well, I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. We're doing out of 10, right? So, I
yeah.
got to give it a 9. Actually, you know what? I'll give it an 8. I'll give it an 8 because for what it was really, really well done. I'm not saying this is a kind of episode that I would normally, like, oh man, I can't wait to see this one or something like that. Normally, if I were giving it from an interest, I'd say like maybe a 6 or something. But because of what the episode was trying to do and just taking it on its own merit, it's a very well done episode. It moved me emotionally, which these type of episodes don't generally do. So, for that reason, I got to give it an 8 out of 10.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a 7. I think it was well done. The the story was simplistic, and that's okay. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but because there wasn't a whole lot of meat, I mean, it's pretty much like, okay, it's talked about something we already pretty much know kind of happens. So I was already kind of aware, like, okay, yeah, they're gonna find out she's a Jedi because she's gonna use her powers or something like that.
Exactly.
But
Yeah,
I
that
mean, so
comparison that
that
you made to the Grogu thing, that was spot on. Because that's exactly what
yeah,
that was like.
yeah, and so that's why it's like, okay, it wasn't spectacular to me, or it didn't give me insight as to the Jedi per se for me, because I'm well aware. But I think for other people who may not be as aware, this was a good episode for them. Like David, this is good for him to see. Um,
Yeah, well,
but
speaking of which, he
he must have
says,
said something.
yeah, if y'all could do your own episode, what would it be?
Of Tales from the Jedi. Ooh. If we're sticking with those two characters, or are we going to other
Well, I mean,
characters? If I had
I think he's just saying like whatever,
in
right?
general,
I mean,
uh,
obviously from this show though, because it's own episode, not own series. So, if you could do your own episode of this show,
hmm, I would say I would like to. Honestly, I would love to see one that chronicled Mace Windu's rise, like his early beginnings, and seeing what Mace Windu was like.
yeah, I
He's
could.
always a character that I wanted to know more about.
Yeah, he's fascinating. It's funny because I was actually taking it for the other end of it. So I would say if I were going to do an episode, if it were like more of a origin-ish type thing, it would
Hmm.
probably be not Yoda's beginnings, but more how Yoda transitioned from taking the Jedi Order from where it was to the High Republic to where it is now.
Ah, yeah,
So
be
that would be
good.
cool. The other thing that I would do that related to Mace is I would show the theoretical what happened to him after he flew out of the window after the Palpatine battle. Because,
Oh.
there's all these rumors, of course, that Mace survived, right? So,
Hmm.
I mean, hey, Why not actually show that? That's what I would do. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, overall, I think it was, again, I personally think it was an interesting choice as a kickoff episode to a brand new series. I don't know if I would have necessarily, like, I probably would have put this episode in the middle. So I guess, when you put it like that, you're kind of saying, oh, so in other words, you're saying it's filler. And I'm not necessarily saying it's filler. I mean, I think that in the context of the other episodes, it probably is. I mean, one of the reasons why I avoided just watching the entire series is I want to take each episode on its own merit, and I want to allow the series to build and experience why did you guys do that. I do think it's interesting, though, piggybacking on my own comment, that they chose to drop this entire series instead of doing a week-to-week thing, which leads me to believe that it's made to consume in any order that you wish. However, that said, they did number the episodes for this particular.
Well, seeing as that I've now seen them all, I will say this: I'm glad that they dropped the episodes in the order in which they dropped them.
Because
Like,
I assume you watched them in numerical order, right? I mean,
yeah, I watched them all in numerical order. I mean, granted, you could watch them in any because they're not connected to any, each other. So, however, this is one of those situations where we talked about the show 24, and how like each season progressively got better. Like that's what happens here. Each episode, like
oh, I have no doubt.
I would rather it get better as
than
it
worse.
keeps getting better. No, well, not necessarily worse, but like have a filler. Like, okay, you got some great episodes, and you got this one filler. It's like, man, we were on a roll. Like,
You
I
know
don't want
what?
that train to stop.
That's exactly what happened in season 2 of The Mandalorian. They dropped that killer first episode where they had Cobb Vanth, they got the Boba Fett armor. They did, like they gave you this spectacular opening episode, and then the next episode was Frog Lady and getting her eggs to, whatever. Now, of course, that turned out to be a multi-episode arc, but still, you didn't know that when you were watching the second episode. You're like, what, that's it? So, yeah, I totally agree. All right, well, of course, you guys heard what we think of this episode, and you've heard what we would do if we could do our own episode. So let's just turn that question to you guys. I mean, you still have about maybe like 30 seconds to chat it in. Chat it in, not chat it in.
Ah,
See what I did there?
I see what you did
That's
there.
if Chad's still watching. And if Chad is still watching, just like the others who are watching now would be a good time for you guys to hit that like button. Because the YouTube algorithm and I have something very much in common. We both like people hitting that like button. So please hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. And then, of course, like I said, you still have 20 seconds or so to leave it in the chat what you guys overall thought of the episode, like what you would rate it, and what you would do if you could do your own episode of the show. And as an added bonus, let me know in the comments section whether you're watching this episode just one at a time. I mean, are you just binging it, or are you trying to space it out a little? Because you probably don't have to space it out because it's not really sequential, like, say, a Clone Wars or Bad Batch or something. But I am curious on, if people are just maybe taking one episode a day or whatever. I'm really curious. So let us know. Haha, Chad. He, because this is a joke that we had at work, he had to bring it up because that's what I was referring to. The Chad feed. The Chad feed. Well, all right, that's good. All right, so I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up for this week. And what's great about this whole thing, now that all these series are out, we know what we're talking about. There's no mystery or where I have to say to you, Daryl, as I often do, like, hey, what are we talking about, coming up? We know what we're talking about. We're going to be reviewing episode 9 of Andor this Friday. And then, of course, a week from tonight, episode 2 of Tales of the Jedi. So, if you guys, maybe you're not keeping up with these series and you just want to check out and see what they're about before you watch them, then definitely watch these reviews, although they are spoiler reviews. And definitely check out the episodes yourselves and come in and join the discussion. So we'll see you guys Friday at 8 for our review of Andor Episode 9. Till then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
And because it's a special night, have a happy rest of your Halloween night if you're watching us live.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not watching us live, well,
don't eat too much candy.
Yeah, it kind of, yeah, exactly. Hopefully you checked your candy before, you watched it. So we'll see you guys Friday at 8.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.